On the screen, a document, a U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services phone log dated, timed, and stamped, a single entry highlighted in damning red. He had no idea she was keeping a record of everything. He thought he was in control, that he held all the cards. He was about to find out just how wrong he was, and it was going to cost him everything. Before we expose every single leaked document, every damning text message, and the sworn testimony that blew this case wide open, I need you to do one thing for us here at the Tell All Tapes. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You are not going to want to miss a single second of this explosive exclusive report. We are going deep inside the case that TLC and the mainstream entertainment news outlets are too scared to touch. This isn't just a recap. This is an investigation. Now, let's get into it. To understand the sheer magnitude of Gino Palazzolo's betrayal, we have to rewind the tape. We have to go back to the source of the rot in their relationship, a rot that has been festering. Since day one, we all watched their tumultuous journey on day Fiancé. We saw the arguments, the accusations, the constant push and pull of power. But what we saw on our screens was only the tip of the iceberg. Sources close to the couple, who have requested to remain anonymous for fear of legal reprisal, have told us that behind the closed doors of their Michigan home, the drama was times more intense. The central theme, the weapon that was always brandished in every single conflict, was Jasmine's immigration status. It was the gun Gino kept loaded on the mantelpiece, a constant unspoken threat that hung over every disagreement. We saw hints of it, of course. We saw his control over the finances, his reluctance to part with a single dollar for her needs, treating her less like a partner and more like a high-maintenance investment he was beginning to regret. But according to our insider reports, this financial control was inextricably linked to her visa. It was a package deal. The money and the green card were two sides of the same coercive coin. "You're here because of me," was a phrase Jasmine allegedly heard on a weekly, sometimes daily basis. It was his mantra, his way of reminding her who was in charge, who held the power to upend her entire existence with a single word. She was a guest in his country, a guest in his house, and he never let her forget it. The final explosive fight that led to the fateful phone call wasn't about a toothbrush or a paint color. It was, as it so often was, about the prenup. But this time was different. Jasmine, after months of feeling like a prisoner in her own home, had finally sought independent legal counsel. A lawyer in Michigan, a sharp, no-nonsense woman, had opened her eyes to the predatory nature of the agreement Gino was trying to force upon her. It wasn't just about protecting his assets. It was about ensuring she would leave their marriage with absolutely nothing, not even a claim to the increased value of his portfolio that she, as his wife and partner, had contributed to, even if indirectly. It was designed to keep her powerless. Armed with this new knowledge, Jasmine confronted Gino. This wasn't the usual tearful, screaming confrontation the cameras loved. To capture this was a cold, quiet declaration of independence. Our sources describe a scene of chilling intensity. Jasmine presented Gino with a revised version of the prenup one her lawyer had drafted, which was fair and equitable. It protected his premarital assets but acknowledged her rights as his wife. She placed it on the dining room table and said in a voice devoid of its usual fire, "You will sign this, Gino. This is the agreement of a partnership. The other one was the contract of a master and a slave. We are partners or we are nothing." Gino, as you can imagine, did not react well. His world was built on control. He saw this not as a request for fairness, but as a rebellion. His entire dynamic with Jasmine was predicated on her dependence. Her sudden show of strength, of having an outside ally in the form of a lawyer, sent him into a spiral. The argument that followed was said to be the worst they ever had. All the old insults were thrown around, the accusations of her being a gold digger, his pathetic denials and whining. But it culminated in a moment that would seal his fate, according to a statement Jasmine later gave in her court deposition, a document we have exclusively obtained. "You know," screamed at her, his face red and contorted with rage. "You think you're so smart with your lawyer. You think you can come into my country and my house and make demands. You forget who you are. You are nothing without me. I can make one phone call, and you'll be on a plane back to Panama, so fast your head will spin. You want to be a partner? Go be a partner with someone in Panama. Jasmine didn't cry. She didn't scream back. She simply looked at him, a cold, hard realization dawning in her eyes. She picked up her revised prenup from the table, walked into the other room, and closed the door. To Gino, this was a victory. He had put her back in her place. He had reminded her who was boss. He went to bed that night feeling smug, convinced that by morning she would come to him, tail between her legs, ready to sign his original ironclad prenup. He had no idea what he had just unleashed. He had no idea that behind that closed door, Jasmine was not cowering in fear. She was preparing for war. The following morning, Jasmine was gone. She had packed a bag and left, staying with a new friend she had made. Gino woke up to an empty house and a single note on the kitchen counter. It read, "I will not be threatened." The silence of the house unnerved him. His tool of control, his ultimate weapon had been deployed, and instead of bringing her to heel, it had driven her away. His narcissistic ego couldn't handle it. The rejection, the defiance, it was too much for his fragile psyche to bear. And that is when he decided to move from threat to action. That is when he picked up the phone and made the call that would cost $. This brings us to the centerpiece of this entire scandal, the sworn declaration of a U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services officer. Let's call him Officer Ramirez, to protect his identity. Backed by official, undeniable USCIS call logs, the document is chilling in its bureaucratic simplicity. It lays out in black and white the anatomy of Gino's malicious act. At a.m. on a Tuesday morning, a call was received by the USCIS National Customer Service Center. The call was flagged and escalated due to the serious nature of the allegation. Marriage fraud. Officer Ramirez's sworn statement, which was read aloud in court, paints a vivid picture. He stated that a man identifying himself as Gino Palazzolo, providing his full name, date of birth, and a number from his sponsorship paperwork, initiated the call. Gino's voice was described as agitated and nervous. He began the conversation by saying he needed to report a serious problem with an ongoing spousal visa application. He gave Jasmine's full name and her case number, proving this was a premeditated act. He had gathered the paperwork before making the call. The transcript of the call, attached as an exhibit to the court filings, is a masterclass. And self-incriminating foolishness, Gino, in his whiny, self-pitying tone, told the federal officer, "Listen, I've made a terrible mistake. The woman I sponsored, my wife, Jasmine Pineda, I don't think she ever loved me. I think she just used me to get to America. She's just after my money. And now she's making all these demands, and I think it's all a fraud, a complete fraud." Officer Ramirez, a man who has likely heard every story imaginable, followed his training. He asked Gino for specific evidence of this fraud. Had she ever stated she didn't love him? Had she discussed a plan to leave him after getting her green card? Was there any proof that the marriage was not legitimate? Gino's answers were a rambling mess of vague complaints. "She just spends so much money," he allegedly said. "She's not grateful for everything I've done for her. We had a fight, a really bad one, and she's just not listening to me anymore. She's not acting like a wife should." The officer, in his statement, noted that Mr. Palazzolo's complaints sounded personal and vindictive, not like a legitimate report of immigration fraud. But he had to do his job. He asked Gino, "Sir, what is it you wish for USCIS to do with this information?" And this is the moment Gino sealed his fate. He took a deep breath and said the words that would be played back to him in a silent, stunned courtroom months later. "I want to withdraw my sponsorship. I want to cancel her application. I want you to send her back. She doesn't deserve to be in this country." He had done it. He had pushed the big red button. He hung up the phone, likely feeling a surge of power and vindication. He had shown her he had finally called her bluff and proven that he held her entire life in his hands. He imagined her receiving a deportation notice, her world crumbling around her, forced to come crawling back to him, begging for his forgiveness, ready to sign any piece of paper he put in front of her. But Gino Palazzolo, in his infinite arrogance, made one catastrophic miscalculation. He assumed Jasmine was just a hysterical, emotional woman. He had no idea she was also a meticulous, intelligent, and deeply strategic survivor. He had no idea about the blackmail binder. When Jasmine received the official notification from USCIS, it wasn't a deportation order. It was a request for evidence, or RFE. The letter was dense with legal jargon, but the message was clear. A derogatory report had been filed against her alleging her marriage was fraudulent, her case was being suspended pending further investigation, and she was required to provide substantial evidence that her marriage was in fact bona fide. The letter sent a chill of pure terror down her spine. It was happening. His ultimate threat had become a reality. She could be sent home, her dreams turned to dust, her reputation and Panama ruined forever. But after the initial wave of panic subsided, something else took over. Cold, hard fury. Because Jasmine knew with absolute certainty who had made that call. And she was ready. For months, ever since the threats had started, Jasmine had been doing something in secret. Every time Gino used her immigration status as a weapon, every time he sent a menacing text, every time he screamed a threat during a fight, she documented it. She had been building a case not for a divorce, but for her own survival she had created. And her lawyer would later dramatically unveil in court as the blackmail binder. This binder was not some haphazard collection of angry texts. It was a meticulously organized, chronologically arranged portfolio of psychological abuse and coercion. It was a diary of deceit, cataloging Gino's escalating campaign to keep her under his thumb, using the threat of deportation as his primary tool. The courtroom was absolutely captivated as Jasmine's lawyer, a formidable woman named Jessica Miller, presented the binder to the judge. It was a thick black ring binder, and as she opened it, a hush fell over the room. Gino, sitting at the defendant's table, turned a pale, sickly shade of gray. The first piece of evidence presented was a series of text messages blown up on a large screen for the entire court to see. The text painted a chilling, undeniable pattern. The early ones were subtle, almost passive-aggressive. A message from Gino a year prior read, "You really need to be more careful with spending. Jasmine, remember everything I'm doing for you to get you here. It's a lot of responsibility for me." It seemed innocuous on its own, but it was the foundation. He was establishing the dynamic. "I am the benefactor. You are the recipient. You owe me." Then the texts became more direct as their conflicts escalated. A few months later, during a fight about her wanting to visit her family in Panama, "I don't think that's a good idea right now. We need to focus on your adjustment of status. Let's not do anything to rock the boat with immigration. We need to show them we are a stable, committed couple." The subtext was clear. "Your freedom of movement is subject to my approval, which is linked to the immigration process I control." And then the smoking gun, the text message that made the entire courtroom gasp. It was sent just 2 days before Gino made his call to USCIS during the height of their fight over the prenup. There it was in his own words in the familiar blue bubble on the screen. "If you don't do exactly as I say and the prenup I gave you, I swear to God, Jasmine, I'll call immigration and have you sent back to Panama on the next flight. Don't test me. You have no idea what I'm capable of." The lawyer let that message hang in the air, the silence in the courtroom thick with tension. She then turned to the judge and said, "Your Honor, Mr. Palazzolo's call to USCIS was not the act of a concerned citizen reporting a fraudulent marriage. It was the act of a blackmailer making good on a threat. It was the follow-through. It was the trigger being pulled on a gun. Had been holding to my client's head for over a year, but there was more. The binder also contained audio files. Jasmine, very ram iPhone, fearing for her future, had started to secretly record some of their more explosive arguments on her phone. The lawyer played a clip. The courtroom was filled with the sound of Gino's screeching, high-pitched voice, distorted by rage. "You ungrateful butt." His voice shrieked from the court speakers. "I own you, do you understand me? Your life in this country is in my hands. If I say you stay, you stay. If I say you go, you are gone. You have nothing. You are nothing without me and my sponsorship." The audio was a gut punch. It was raw, ugly, and undeniable. It was the voice of a tyrant, not a loving husband. You could hear Jasmine sobbing in the background, her voice small and pleading.
Gino, please don't say that.
That's not fair. And his voice booming back.
Fair. Don't talk to me about fair.
You'll know it's not fair when you're filling out. Customs forms back in Panama City. Gino's defense was in shambles. His lawyer had tried to argue that his call was made in good faith. He genuinely believed the marriage was a sham and he was fulfilling his civic duty. But the blackmail binder had systematically, piece by piece, dismantled that lie. It proved a clear and long-standing pattern of coercion, intimidation, and emotional abuse, all centered on Jasmine's precarious immigration status. The phone call wasn't a spontaneous act of civic duty, it was a calculated, vindictive act of revenge, the culmination of a year-long campaign of threats. This is where the case takes a fascinating legal turn, one that sets a stunning precedent. Jasmine wasn't just defending herself against deportation, she was on the attack. Her lawyer, Jessica Miller, filed a civil lawsuit against Gino in a Michigan state court, separate from the immigration proceedings. The charge was not for emotional distress or abuse, which can be hard to quantify. Instead, she used a brilliant and powerful legal strategy. She sued him for tortious interference with prospective economic advantage. Now that's a mouthful of legal jargon, so let me break it down for you, because this is the key to the whole dollar judgment. In simple terms, this law says that you cannot maliciously and intentionally interfere with someone else's potential to earn money or secure a business opportunity. For example, if you know someone is about to get a big job, you can't call their new boss and lie about them to get them fired. That's tortious interference. Jasmine's lawyer argued that a green card is not just a residency document for an immigrant. It is the key to a future of economic opportunity. It is the license to work, to build a career, to earn a living, to participate in the American economy by calling USCIS and maliciously trying to sabotage her green card application. Vino was not just trying to get her deported. He was deliberately attempting to destroy her entire economic future in the United States. He was trying to blow up her chance to earn American dollars, to build a brand, to use her newfound fame from the show to create a life for herself and her children. To prove the economic advantage part, Jasmine's team brought in a financial expert. This expert presented a detailed analysis of Jasmine's potential earning power in the United States. They broke it down. Methodically, they analyzed her marketability as an influencer, showing the court the high engagement rates on her social media and comparing her to other Fiancé cast members who had successfully monetized their platforms. They projected potential earnings from brand deals, endorsements, and sponsored content, which ran into the S of thousands of dollars per year. They also highlighted her professional qualifications. They reminded the court that Jasmine has a doctorate in education. They presented evidence of average salaries for educators and corporate trainers with her level of experience in the state of Michigan. They argued that with a green card, she could have pursued a stable, well-paying career in her chosen field, earning a comfortable middle class American salary for years to come. They even factored in potential income from modeling and public appearances. Given her public profile, they added it all up year after year and presented the court with a staggering number representing her prospective economic advantage. The money she stood to earn in America, a future that Gino had tried to burn to the ground with a single phone call. The expert testified that a multi-year delay or a denial of her green card caused directly by Gino's malicious report would cost Jasmine hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost potential income. It was a brilliant strategy. It transformed the case from a messy domestic dispute into a clear-cut business tort. It wasn't about love and betrayal anymore. It was about dollars and cents. It was about one person deliberately sabotaging another's financial future out of pure spite. The trial was a spectacle. The local Michigan news outlet started to pick it up. It was the perfect storm of reality TV, drama, and serious legal precedent. Gino's defense was weak and pathetic. He sat at the table looking bewildered as his own hateful words were read back to him. His lawyer tried to argue that his actions were protected by free speech, that he had a right to report what he believed to be a crime. But Jasmine's lawyer countered that this right does not extend to making a report. In bad faith, using a federal agency as a tool to follow through on a personal threat of blackmail. The evidence from the binder proved his bad faith beyond any reasonable doubt. The judge, a stern older man named Judge Albright, listened to all the evidence with a look of growing disgust. He seemed particularly appalled by the audio recording of Gino screaming at Jasmine. When the evidence presentation was complete, he looked over his spectacles at Gino, his eyes filled with contempt. He didn't even need to recess to deliberate. He was ready to rule from the bench. His words, according to the official court transcript, were a brutal takedown of Gino Palazzolo. Mr. Palazzolo, the judge began, his voice booming through the silent courtroom. For the past 2 days, this court has listened to a sordid tale of cruelty and manipulation. You brought this woman, your wife, to a new country, away from her home, her family, and her support system. You made her entirely dependent on you for her security and her future. And you used that power not to nurture and protect her, but to control and terrorize her. He paused, letting the words sink in. Gino stared down at the table, unable to meet the judge's gaze. Your call to U.S. immigration was not a good faith report, the judge continued, his voice rising with indignation. This court finds that it was a malicious and calculated act of sabotage. It was the cowardly, vindictive act of a man who, upon losing control of his wife, decided to burn her life to the ground. You used a federal law enforcement agency as your own personal weapon of revenge. In doing so, you not only jeopardized Miss Pineda's residency status, but you deliberately and tortiously interfered with her ability to work, to prosper, and to establish an independent life in the United States. The judge then turned to the financial aspect. This court accepts the financial analysis presented by the plaintiff's expert. Miss Pineda's green card represents a clear and significant prospective economic advantage. Your actions directly threaten that advantage and have caused her not only immense emotional distress, but have also resulted in a significant delay. The potential damage to her career and earning potential. This court will not tolerate such malicious abuse of process. And then he delivered the final devastating blow. Therefore, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff Jasmine Pineda. It is the judgment of this court that the defendant Gino Palazzolo is ordered to pay the plaintiff damages for tortious interference with prospective economic advantage based on a conservative estimate of her potential lost income, emotional distress, and the need for a significant punitive deterrent to prevent others from ever contemplating such a despicable act. The court awards Miss Pineda a lump sum payment of $. The collective gasp went through the courtroom. Jasmine burst into tears, but this time they were tears of vindication and relief. Her lawyer put a comforting arm around her. Gino looked up, his face a mask of utter shock and disbelief. $. The numbers seemed to hang in the air, and impossible life-altering sum for a man as notoriously frugal as Gino. His plan to control her, to punish her, to send her home with nothing had backfired in the most spectacular and expensive way imaginable. He tried to get her deported, but, in the end, the law was about to make him pay for her American dream anyway. The judge slammed his gavel down, the sound echoing like a gunshot, sealing Gino's fate. The battle was won, but the war for Jasmine's future was far from over. The civil judgment was one thing. Her immigration case, now tainted by Gino's report, was another battle entirely. And the fallout from this courtroom drama was about to get even more complicated. The gavel fell, and the sound cracked through the sterile Michigan courtroom, like a bone breaking. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Not a cough, not a shuffle of paper, just the ringing aftermath of that single, final sound. Gino Palazzolo sat frozen, his mouth slightly agape, his face the color of spoiled milk. The number $, seemed to be replaying in his mind on a loop, each repetition a fresh wave of nausea. He looked less like a man who had lost a lawsuit and more like a man who had just witnessed a car crash in which he was the sole fatality. Across the aisle, Jasmine Pineda finally let out a shuddering breath she seemed to have been holding for a year. The tears that streamed down her face were not the tears of a victim. They were the tears of a warrior at the end of a long, brutal war. They were tears of pure, unadulterated victory. But the drama didn't end when the judge left the bench. What happened next in the quarters of the courthouse has not been reported by anyone else, but our sources on the ground paint a picture of utter chaos. As Jasmine and her lawyer, Jessica Miller, were mobbed by a small group of local reporters, Gino, prodded by his own shell-shocked attorney, stumbled out into the hallway. He saw Jasmine, saw the cameras flashing in her face, and something inside him snapped. The carefully constructed facade of the calm, misunderstood victim he had tried to maintain in court crumbled into dust. Witnesses say he lunged forward, his hands clenched into fists, his face a grotesque mask of fury. "You will not get a penny," he shrieked, his voice cracking with a mixture of rage and panic. "Not 1 cent of my money. I'll appeal. I'll file for bankruptcy. You'll be back in Panama before you ever see a dollar." His own lawyer had to physically restrain him, grabbing him by the shoulders and pulling him back as courthouse security officers moved in. Jasmine didn't even flinch.